All right. So we're still talking a lot about the vaccine issue. And I think it is a little bit silly where everybody is. Um, the it's funny to watch on X how the two sides are so adamantly against each other when they're just asking for more research. Um, what you have to understand about the pro-vaccine side is you have to understand where their base is really at. Their base is that you should never ever believe mothers. That's basically where they're at. The hundreds of thousands of mothers who've come out and been like, look, kid was like this, got a vaccine, and then shortly after it was totally different. The entire medical community is coming out and saying that every single mother who says that's a liar. Um, and they're saying that, that autism specifically, let's just stick with autism. There's a whole bunch of other things, but let's stick with autism for a second. Autism is fully genetic and has nothing to do with environmental chemical toxins or vaccines or anything like that. So my question on that is that if it's genetic and the child has it, but the mother and the father don't, the grandparents on both sides don't, the great grandparents on both sides don't, the great great grandparents on both sides don't, have never shown any issues for this all the way down. It's a very interesting thing that all of a sudden in the past 20 years, our genetics have gone sideways so hard so fast that genetically that's the actual issue. It's a genetic problem, and that's why people are having autism, is because our genes are messed up. Which, medicine's first primary thing is always go back and blame God. Like they come out and they're like, well, God gave you cholesterol, and if you have cholesterol, you're going to have heart attacks because it's cholesterol. That's nothing to do with what's damaging your cholesterol. But don't worry, we have a drug to study for that. It was the same thing with vaccines. They're saying that man has created hundreds of chemicals that are better than any chemical God's ever created, because every chemical God has created has a dose path function with it. So what I mean by that is water. Let's just use water for example. If you drink too much water, you will die. You will become hyponatremic and you will die. There is an amount of water that you can consume that is toxic to you. However, the idea with vaccines is that that's not a thing. The same amount of vaccine that is for a 240-pound man and a 6-8 week preemie baby that weighs 3.5 pounds is the same dose. And the idea with the vaccine crowd is that heavy metals have absolutely zero negative impact on the brain. However, if you do any research on heavy metals in the brain, you'll find out that they have a significant amount of damage and dysfunction to the brain. And so that's one of those issues, which is really funny, is when everybody's telling like, oh, RFK walks back that, he was wrong, that Tylenol doesn't cause autism. He never said it causes autism. What he said is that there's a link between the utilization of Tylenol and autism. And the reason there's a link is because Tylenol depletes glutathione. Glutathione is the chemical your body uses to detoxify everything, specifically heavy metals in the brain. So if you decrease the body's ability to remove heavy metals and then you inject heavy metals into the brain, they create into the body that end up in the brain, they end up creating problems. And so that was the reason that they came out and talked about Tylenol. Which I still think is hilarious. I've talked about this many times, is, in order to stick it to the man, she's pregnant when they went too much Tylenol, they ended up damaging their babies and themselves and causing liver failure and stuff like that, because people are too stupid to understand what they're doing. But that's the thing. And so you have to understand a vast majority of the anger about what RFK is doing has nothing to do with RFK. It has entirely to do with Orange Man bad. That's where this is. It's gone political. It's gone away from, hey, we got to figure out what's going on with our kids, why they have the highest rate of autoimmune issues, why they have all these allergies, why they have all this ADD, why they have this autism, like why they have all these issues. Let's try to figure this out. And because RFK is was put in a position of power by Donald Trump, everybody hates, anybody who has Orange Man bad syndrome has decided that whatever RFK says is wrong, which, all he's saying is that he wants these vaccines tested against a placebo that is a placebo. And for those who don't understand researchal testing, a placebo is something that has zero functional effect in the body. The gold standard is saline. So basically injecting saline in instead of something else. The vaccine community wants to test the adjunct versus the active. And the adjunct is the thing that creates all the inflammation. The purpose of the adjunct is to create systemic chronic inflammation that then allows the body to mount an immune response to the virus or whatever they're injecting into you, that then theoretically builds your immune system. Well, the problem is that the adjunct that they're wanting to use as the placebo has all the heavy metals and has all the formaldehyde and has all the toxic chemicals in it. And so what they're saying is like, hey, we'll test the adjunct versus the active. And as long as the active doesn't have more autism and more ADD and more problems than the adjunct, then it's totally safe. But the problem is that the vaccine guys are going, it's the adjunct we have a problem with. Test it against the placebo. And so what they ended up doing instead was, because that's been deemed, like, the reason they won't do that is that's been deemed, what do they call it? Inhumane. Because if you have the ability to give a child a drug that is purported to stop horrible, terrible diseases, and you don't do it, you're a terrible person. And so that's kind of where that was it. And so that's why those studies haven't been done. And then when they took a whole bunch of kids, they're like, well, let's just see what it does. They took a couple thousand kids who'd been vaccinated versus a couple thousand kids who had not been vaccinated. And they're like, what's the difference? And they found out the kids who were not vaccinated had a whole lot lower autoimmune issues, a lot less asthma, ADD, ADHD, gut issues, things like that. And then the vaccine crowd came out and was like, you can't look at that. That's not scientific. You can't look at people who had the drug and people who haven't had the drug and find out the people who had the drug got real sick and people who didn't have the drug didn't get sick. You can't do that. That's not right. And so that's where the argument's coming out about these new Ford studies and things like that. So that's basically where it is. There's a whole lot of evidence that these drugs are causing some problems, and RFK and his team wants them looked into, because according to what's been brought forth, 0 of these vaccines have been tested against an actual placebo. So that was the question. Why have they not been tested against placebo? We want them tested against placebo. And so that's been the whole basis of this argument. And so there's a whole lot of reasons why, psychological and financial and power and whatnot, why the vaccine community doesn't want these studies being done, or why they're saying that the studies are wrong. But that's the basis of the argument. The pro-vaccine people are saying that every single mother who's come out and said, my child is different after vaccine, is a liar. And they're just anti-vaccine, they're anti-science. And that the people who have the truth are the people who are the vaccine guys. Now, on that, I'd like to make a couple more comments on that. When I was going through Daddy Boot Camp at Baylor Frisco, the head of pediatrics for Baylor came out and said that if your kids get the measles, they will die. That is 100% a lie. According to CDC, over the past 100 years, 3 in 1,000 people who got measles died. None of them died from the measles. 2/3 or 66% of them died from dehydration. Now remember, this is from the last 100 years of information. This isn't past for the last 6 weeks. So it's, well, how do we get water into people? Well, they can drink water. They can do a colonic irrigation, which is basically an enema. They can get an IV, and so, that's the thing. So, all right, how dangerous, how hard is it for people to get clean water nowadays? I have 4 water bottles in this room that they're just like, a patient left one, there's one over here. So we've got plenty of water all around us. The second thing, the other 1/3 of the people who die from measles die from pneumonia. There's a whole vast ways we can prevent deaths from pneumonia now. Now, are some people still going to die if they get it? Probably. So instead of 3 in 1,000, it's, 1 in 50,000. So yeah, people might still die. But at the same time, if this is creating an issue, we need to know about it. But the baseline is that the idea that if you kids get the measles, they're going to die is 100% a lie. And they keep saying that, and it's still a lie. The other thing is that there's a whole bunch of people pushing for the Hep B vaccine at birth. Like, was it Riley Gaines who just came out and said they decided not to do the Hep B vaccine, and people just tore them up online? Guys, hepatitis B or Hep B is a sexually transmitted disease. So if mom doesn't have it and dad doesn't have it, when the baby is born, how are you thinking this baby's going to get it? And remember, the Hep B vaccine isn't good for life. It's good for a couple of years. So what you're basically saying is that you believe within a shadow of a doubt that that baby is going to have sexual encounters, sexual intercourse encounters before the age of 5. I'd like to hope that that is crazy. In fact, anybody who's saying, yeah, you definitely need this, we should investigate those people and wonder, what are you doing with kids? Why do you think sex with a 5-year-old or less is so common? That's a problem I've got with this whole argument of why people need the Hep B vaccine. Now, if mom has hepatitis B, great, give them the vaccine. Fantastic. But if mom doesn't, and we can prove it, I don't think they need it. However, that is a big argument that people are saying that if you don't get the Hep B vaccine, you're a horrible, terrible person, even if there's zero chance that baby could have Hep A. And so this is kind of where it is. The idea is that, we should not test these things. We should not look at them. We should not, believe the mothers. We should just vaccinate because that's the way things should be. So that's basically the argument on both sides is like, hey, RFK side is we should do some actual testing with these things against the placebo. And we should start looking at the difference between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated and do an actual scientific study and figure out, are these things as good as we thought they were? Because people make mistakes. And, sometimes giant corporations put profit over people, and sometimes government agencies get corrupt. But the vaccine side is that they're arguing government agencies never get corrupt, and that pharmaceutical companies would never, ever put profits over people. And every mother who said anything is a liar. And, heavy metals don't really cause any problems. That's the argument for the vaccine side. So that's kind of where this all boils down to. There's all sorts of science in between and the whole back and forth stuff, but that's really where the argument is. And so kind of look at it through that lens now and try to figure out, is that really where everybody's argument is and which side you stand on? So that's really where the vaccine argument is. Having worked with parents who've, told me over and over again, the kid was like this, got the vaccine, and they were like that. I've heard it, I've seen it. So, that's kind of where this is. So if you're wondering, for people who've seen it, I've seen it. That's where it is. And this is where the argument really lives. So if you guys have any questions about it, look at it from that angle. Anyway, Sean Hendricks and I are doing some stuff on stem cells on X. Follow me, the Dr. Chalmers on X, and follow the Sean Hendricks as well. And next Monday at 7 Central, I think we're going to jump on and do some stuff about stem cells and his lungs and his process he just went through. So if you guys want to see that, jump in and it's going to be a great time. Have a fantastic day. Thanks for your time.